Hey everyone, Insomnia from Unreal Tech, a division of BlenderTech.com, and welcome to another episode in creating a dynamic linked inventory and crafting system series. Now that the items stack, or don't stack depending on what you decided, let's make our inventory useful really quickly. So today we'll be adding a drop and a use button. Depending on how long I take will depend on how advanced we make the use button in this episode. Of course, I will be adding bonus episodes later on to add more functionality in all our systems. With that said, open up your project. Remember, we're now working in 4.8. Also, don't forget our motto, create your way, and let's get started. So just a quick review. In the last episode, we made it so that you could pick up items. We have 2 boxes and 3 swords, and we decided that the boxes would stack and the swords wouldn't, and we open up our inventory. We get 2 boxes and 3 swords, and I added a few little buttons there, so we're going to work on that today. So open up your GUI folder and inventory, and we want inventory button open, and we want inventory main open. So those buttons I placed there, they were just for examples. We're going to delete those. So the first thing that we're going to need is a border, some place to put our buttons, and we'll drag it out just a rough size for now. And then I'm going to get rid of the animations window again, and then hit the little yellow arrow to bring up the tab for the timeline and close that so we have more space to work again, since we are not adding any animations yet, but we might later. So we don't need a very big box, just enough to hold a couple buttons. Like I said, remember, you can resize these at any time based on the way we set up. You can see size box for the list. I can resize it at any time, and everything will adapt to it automatically. So that's why I like using the setup that I do with these size boxes. Anyway, so back to our border. Back with our border here. We'll call this border interact maybe, and we want it to be a variable, I believe. We'll see. And the brush color we will change to my favorite, 282828FF. There we go. Perfect, perfect. Alright, and then we'll throw a size box on top of it. So the size box, we want a width and height override, and then in the border interact, we want to hit size to content so that whatever size we set the size box to will be the size of the border. So we want it to be, we'll go about 256 by, how about 256? Start there, something like that. And then again, we want to start vertically, so we'll add a vertical box. I like the way 4.8, they make it a lot easier to add widgets into the hierarchy. So we'll add a vertical box on top of the size box. And then we will add, we don't need any text there, so we'll just start with some buttons. So we'll add a button, we'll add another button, set them to fill, both of them. And that way they will automatically use up all the space allotted to them, and in doing so I realize that is much too big, so the height override maybe 128. Then we will take the text, or a text block, whoops, and we will drag one on top of each button. So the top one is going to be our use whatever you would want, equip / whatever. And yeah, I like that size. I like the buttons to stand out. In fact, I'm going to change the color to my favorite yellow. It's somewhere in here. Doesn't really stand out as much as I intended. So what we'll do is we will add a shadow. So hit shadow color and just turn the alpha up to 1, and that will really make it pop. We'll go to text block down here. This one is going to be drop. You always want to be able to drop items in most games. We'll give it a shadow too, and we will give it roughly the same color. And in a later episode, I don't think today, we'll make it so the color can change depending on what is written and depending on if you're hovering, clicked, whatever. There we go. Alrighty, so that looks good to me. And we can use the same trick, or if we go to the graph, we can give it a background image, which will be our high-res screenshot. Give it a little bit better view of what it'll look like in game. And just because I thought of it, let's add some shadow to our text blocks here. So we'll grab the inventory text block. We'll give the shadow an alpha of 1. It's barely noticeable, but it just makes it pop a little bit without having to go into Photoshop and make your own images. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so what we need to do is create an on-clicked binding. So we go down, we have our buttons. I'm gonna name them here really quickly. So I'm just gonna call this button use, it's just a very general term. And the second one I'm gonna name button, I'm gonna name it button drop. So I'll start with the drop because that's the easiest one. So what we do is we select the drop button and then we hit the plus sign for the on-clicked event, and that will create a new on-clicked event. It'll be on-clicked button drop. So we just hit the plus and it will create it in our graph. Yeah, it'll be fine where it is. We can give it a nice big comment box afterwards. So on clicked button dropped, what we want to do is we want to spawn an actor. It's right here, perfect. Spawn actor from class. We will wire those together. So basically when we drop, we just spawn the inventory item is essentially the basics behind this. Of course, it's not that easy, but that's the basics behind it. But it really isn't that complicated. All you really need to think about is what class you want to drop, and the class we want to drop is, well, the item you have selected. And if you've noticed, the way we do that is by going to our first person character. We'll do a getter, and then you just get inventory item I believe I said it too, yeah, inv button clicked. Yep, get inv button clicked. And we also want to get inventory array. Perfect, just like that. So that's how you figure out what button is clicked on. If you haven't realized that by now, that's how you figure out what button is being clicked on in the inventory. So what we want to do is we want to do a getter. So we get off of the array, and the index we want to get is the button that we currently have selected, so the item we currently have selected. Then we want to break that struct, bring that down, and we want the thing that I forgot is very important for everything. We need to go back into our struct. So go to your items and S item data. We need to add, how could I have forgotten, item class, and that will be an actor class. So scroll all the way down to actor class, the purple one. And so the reason we do that is so that each item has a class that it can drop. There's lots of things you can do with it, but without that we would just have a name, and we'd have to somehow try to find its substring and get it just turn into a mess without the item class. So what that means, just give that a save. That means, of course, remember, most importantly, whenever you add something to these structs, you need to go back into your first person character. You need to go into the add to inventory function, and you need to reconnect, or you need to connect for the first time the new struct data members, new struct members. So compile and save that. And now that means we also need to fix something I totally went and forgot about. Under our items, we need to go into BP box and BP sword, or whatever items you've created, and you see we don't have the class. That's because we need to open up BP item master, so it's a good thing I caught it this early. We need to recompile, so as you can see, that will give us an item class, so we can close our master item. Now for our sword, for example, the class is going to be itself, unless for some reason you wanted to say pick up a sword, and then whenever you use or drop it, it completely forgets about BP sword and it drops or uses another class. That's another use you use for this, but 99% of the cases in games you want it to be the same class. This is going to be slightly different when we get to crafting, but it'll be the exact same BP blueprint that you set it up in, just so that it can drop itself, spawn itself. So compile and save that one, and we can close that. And the box, under its Class defaults, by the way, is how you get to this information. Item class, BP, this is a box. Should have made some thumbnails up, but whatever. Anyways, so those are good. So now we should be able to close out the character too, and the struct for now. So now we have item class. So where we spawn an actor, what class do we want to spawn? Well, we want to spawn the current one that we have selected. We want to spawn its class. So just drag class to class. Nice and neat, perfect. We'll bring it up. Make it nice and clean. Perfect, perfect. Now we need to give it a transform. So what I like to do is very, very similar to the way we did the ray tracing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna drag off of our first person character, and we're gonna get a few details. We're going to get actor location. We're going to get a variable called, well, not a variable, it's part of a character, get base eye height. And if you're working off a different character, you'll have to adjust this a little bit if you don't have a stock character collider that has a base eye height value. You'll have to work with it a little bit and get it to drop properly. And even this might not drop exactly like you want it. And so what we want to do is we want to take the actor location, so wherever you are, the player, we want to add two vectors, so plus sign vector plus vector. What we want to add to it is base eye height dot x. So we could just split this and just go x to x. So we're just adding x, so we're putting it forward a little bit, so along the x axis, which if we go to our character, just so happens to be in front of us. And you could make that a variable if you wanted, so that you could have, say, it drop at a different distance depending on, say, like the item weight, or you could just type a value right in. But that way it just comes right over the character system. Anyways, off of that we want to do another vector addition, and off of that we want to make a transform. Actually, I'm just going to split this spawn transform struct pin. I'm just going to put the vector into there, since the rotation and scale will be 0, 0, 0 and 1, 1, 1. And spawn even if colliding we want on, just in case, a little safety check. And so what we want to do with the second addition is we want to drag off of our character one last time, and we want to get control rotation. Now be careful, there's two of them. Make sure it's the pawn one that says this. Get the rotation of the controller. So that's the view rotation of this pawn. So it's kind of like, where are you looking in terms of 360 degrees? But we can't really use degrees to do much. So what we need to do is take this and type in rotate vector, and so that'll take wherever we're looking, we'll add it, we'll put it into our addition there, and we need to give it a value here. So this would be like our total drop distance. So if it was 500, you would drop it 5 meters in front of you. That's quite extreme. I'm gonna go with about 250, 225, somewhere in there. We'll see what that looks like. Another way that you could make it a little more interesting is to give your items physics, and we'll get to that maybe in a later video, and that way they will just drop to the ground and you don't have to worry about this stuff so much. Another thing you could do is you could go off of the spawn transform rotation. You could drag off, you could go make rotation, a make rot, and you could give it values, but that wouldn't be very interesting. So what there is there's a random float, and you can see you can get it from a stream between 0 and 1 in range, so between certain values, but you can just get a totally random float. However, that is going to give you between 0 and 1. So without math, it's not very usable. But there is a random float in range. And so what that will allow us to do is we can go between, say, 15 degrees and 180 degrees. And put that into your pitch, yaw, and roll. And so it'll just randomly rotate it every single time. Just adds a little bit of interest. You don't have to do that, but you can. Yeah, so there's a few different ways you can change this to affect how your items are dropped. And so let's just give that a test. Let's compile and save. And hit play. Let's pick up an item, and then let's go back, hit I for inventory, select it, and drop. As you can see, it did drop right in front of us a good distance, but the rotation kind of screwed it up. So that's why I like items to have physics, but you can see how it was random. If I did it again, it's going to be totally different. So I, box, drop. There you go, it's totally random. So yeah, that's probably why you want physics. Or maybe add a little bit of Z value. But anyways, you could even go like 0 to 360, so it's totally random anywhere, any rotation for pitch, yaw, and roll. Anyways, so you notice that it said box 2 even though I dropped them. So once we have spawned the actor, so spawn the actor, or spawn an actor of class selected, of item selected dot class. A little bit messy, but it'll work. Always clean it up later. Not gonna waste time with an app. So what we want to do is we need to somehow remove that item from our inventory now. So what we're gonna do is a remove index. Remove index. And so what this does is it goes through the array and it removes an index. So first of all, we need to plug it into the array. So we want to take this array pin and plug it right into our inventory. That's kind of messy, so I'm gonna add a reroute in there. Double click and drag that up. You can't really get around the messiness too much. Double click again, something like that, whatever. Anyways, or we could just do first person character and then inventory again over here. But anyways, so remove index. So if we removed index 0, it would remove the very first item in our inventory. If we removed index 8, it would remove the 9th item in our inventory. Remember, indexes always start with 0. So how do we figure out what index our item is? Very simply, the inventory button clicked is our index. So we just need to simply connect that to that. And I'm gonna give it another little reroute. Just straighten that out a little bit, maybe. Yeah, something like that'll work. And then we'll comment it. Remove drop item from inventory. So let's compile and save and play test it. And we'll pick something up and we'll open up our inventory, we'll select it, and we will drop it. Now when we reopen our inventory, we have no box. We can pick it up again, we have a box again. So it works, perfect. And one little thing to add on to that, when we hit play, when we drop an item, you then would have to manually, whoops, we'll select it and drop. You then have to manually close the inventory. It's not a big deal, but if you want it to close automatically when you drop an item, all we need to do is go to first person character, go to the event graph, and open close inventory. We have the input action. Now that's bound to a key, but what we can do is we can create a custom event, or sorry, just custom event, add custom event, it's now called, I guess. And the custom event would be toggle inv. And we'll just plug that right into the branch. So whenever that's called, it will, well, toggle the inventory. So compile and save that. Then we go back to the widget And what we do is we simply we'll grab out a new first person car as a getter, and we'll drag off that. We'll just call that custom event. So toggle inv, close inventory when drop. Now you don't need to do this. It's totally a preference. It's just a quick little feature that you can add easily. So compile and save and play. So now when we drop an item, it closes automatically. Perfect. So I'm going to call that good enough for a prototype for now. So now the use button. So we'll select that button. We'll add a on clicked event for it. So hit the plus button. We'll get on click to use. I'm going to highlight all of these and I'm going to comment it as drop currently selected item / drop button / and use gets a little more complex because how do you want to use your item? This is where you're gonna have to come up with your own system. So for example, let's say I was making a you know, survive as long as you can kind of game, like the Unreal example or the Epic Games example by Tom Lumen. You would go into your item data structure, you'd add a new variable, something like can be eaten as a boolean. Save that, go into your character, go into the add to inventory, connect it up, compile and save. Then we go back to our widget and we would do the same as before. We'd wanna get this stuff, get the currently selected one, and break the structure. By the way, we can collapse that now. So what we'd want to do is can be eaten would be on our branch, so it'd be conditional. So if the item can be eaten, let's just pretend that our box can be eaten. So let's open our box, and first of all we need to compile the BP item master. So compile, close that, and in our box under class defaults we'll say that the box can be eaten. Compile and save. So under the inventory main, if an item can be eaten, when you click use, then you would do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to go into the thousands of possibilities for this, but we'll just give an example. You know, yum, tasty. Actually, we're going to append with the new 4.8. You can append multiple strings without RAM as plugin. So we'll say yum, tasty, and then we'll get the item name. It's really, really good. False, print string. Ew, I can't eat that. You know, just an example. It really depends on your game. So compile and save, play, we'll grab our box, box, select it, and we'll grab the interact button. Yum, tasty box. It is really, really good. So it really depends, but we need to set that text. We could have it as just eat, but we want that to be dynamic. So what we want to do is we want to grab the text block for the use equip / whatever button, and we want to bind the content text. So create a binding, and we'll give ourselves lots of space, and you'll need lots depending on how advanced you want to make that. We'll break the execution link, so we'll need a branch, and that branch is going to be the condition we just created. So let's go into the event graph. I'm actually going to comment this out as just example use / eat / equip / whatever button. So we want that right there, the currently selected item, and if it can be eaten, then we want to return a certain value to have displayed on that button. So if it can be eaten, then we need another temporary string. So we'll set this to interact button temp string. And that will be a string, of course, and we want to set it again both times. So if it can be eaten, then the string will be eat and will return. If it can't be eaten, then you would maybe do another check, you know, maybe like if it can't be eaten, you'd make another Boolean, can it be equipped? If yes, then you would set to equipped and return. You could go as far as you want, depending on how many Booleans you had. We just have one, so we just need the one. So if it can't be eaten, then we will simply just set it to null. So we'll drag false, so can't be eaten, to set it to null and return, and then we need to return that final value, so we'll just drag off of this pin here, and there we go. So we'll compile and save. Oops, hide that tab again, play. So we'll pick up a box and a sword, open our inventory. So now you'll see it's null right now. You'll see when we pick up, or when we select the box, however, it changes to eat. When we select the sword, it changes back to null. Ew, I can't eat that. Box, eat. Yum. So just a quick example. And you could go a bit further even with the drop text. You could bind it. So grab the text, create a binding, and you could do something very, very similar. You could, well, not similar, but just to clean things up, we'll call this drop button temp string. Break that, make a branch. We'll paste that stuff out again. And so what we want to do is, we don't need to break anything. What we want to do is, if inventory button clicks, so if the selected, remember how we set it to -1 for null? If this is equal to -1, remember, just like the item weight getter, if the inventory button clicked is equal to -1, where am I? Oh, I forgot to name those functions. The first one is we'll call it the interact button text setter. This will be the drop button text setter. So if it's equal to -1, then we want to set this to null. Whoops, not get. We want to set it to null, otherwise we want to set it to drop. So if true, and return. If false, and return, and we want to return the string. So if it's equal to -1, that means no item is selected, so it'll just be null. But if anything else, then we just want to set it to drop. So now we compile and save and hit play. So now when we pick up some items and open up our inventory, we have nothing for our buttons there. But when we select one, we then have that value is no longer -1, and it then changes to drop. So just something to clean something up, or to clean it up. And you could go a bit further even, and you could have it check constantly. You could have this only display when an item is selected. So you could take this border here, like I said, it's make it a variable, border interact, and we could set its visibility to hidden, then go into the graph, event graph. We could make an event tick. Now you probably wouldn't want to tick this constantly. You'd probably want to go and make a timer. But just as an example, we can go. We'll grab the exact same stuff if it's equal to -1 branch. Go back to the event graph, paste that in there. So if it's equal to -1, then we get border, where is it? border interact, get, and set visibility. So if it's equal to -1, we want it to be hidden, as in if nothing is selected. And otherwise, we want to set it to visible. So we can compile and save that to test it and play. So now when we pick up some items and open up our inventory, you'll see there's no buttons, but when I select one, then they show up. And you could do the same for the preview image too. Heck, you could do it for the whole preview. So just something to show you how you can build upon this. I'm going to leave that out for now, just to make things easier. But anyway, so compile and save. So I'm going to leave that video off here now, and in the next episode we will get to crafting. I promise. We will finish up our crafting menu and we'll get to building that. It shouldn't be too hard now that we have the inventory all set up. We'll be reusing a lot of the logic actually. So the crafting is green. We can set the inventory to dark, or to an orange, since we might need to come back there. The HUD, it can be a dark orange. GUI's good. Items, we don't really need them anymore. They can be orange. Crafting is green. Perfect. We're good to go. So we'll leave that off for now. Save everything, and we'll see you guys in the next video where we actually get into the crafting. So thanks again for watching. From the team here at Unreal Tech, a division of BinaryTech.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, consider subscribing and consider liking the video. We're on social media on the links on your screen. If you dislike this video for some reason, please tell us why so we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests, so we will see you next time. Remember, create your way.